final big event of Andrew Jackson as president we'll talk about today is the bank war. Now, banking is a little bit complicated. We're not going to go into too much of how banking works. I did want you guys just to kind of get an example of that watching the videos yesterday. But the bank war is something that Andrew Jackson is very famous for, and it does put the country on a different trajectory, especially what happens after Jackson's presidency as a result. So you know that Alexander Hamilton created the first national bank of the United States against the wishes of Thomas Jefferson and a few other people, but it did generally well for them, but it did kind of expire. After 1816, it expired, and they let it expire. The Jeffersonian successors, Madison and Monroe, didn't really like it either, so they kind of just let it expire. But a new bank was created a couple years later, and by the time Jackson became president, he had viewed it as a kind of a monster that was allowing for a new aristocracy, like the old lords and ladies of Europe, to dominate over the common folk, and that's who Jackson presented himself as, a champion of the common man. So the second bank was not a part officially of the government, but it acted almost like a treasury for the government because all the government's money was in the bank, and it was controlled by private individuals like this guy over here, Nicholas Biddle. And Biddle is a personal enemy of Jackson's. They butt heads all the time. Other supporters of the bank are two of the big three we mentioned. Daniel Webster's the guy we haven't talked about yet today, and Henry Clay. And I'm just going to point this out here. Nothing you really need to look into it, but that's what Henry Clay looks like. That's his picture, and that's his portrait. So are those the same guy? I guess. Clearly, this guy who painted the portrait probably got paid a lot because that's Henry Clay right there. I think it was Nye that said he looks like the guy from Tales from the Crypt. All right, that's just a little side note. So these guys support the bank. Andrew Jackson does not support the bank, and they are going to butt heads with it because it's going to be set to expire like the first bank was. Now, the first bank, when it expired, it was during the era of good feelings, and no one really was in a huge disagreement about anything in American government, so they let it expire. Now there's two factions. Jackson has already kind of established a new political party, the Democrats, the same Democratic Party that we have today, from the ashes of the old Democratic Republicans. And now, in the election of 1832, Henry Clay is going to establish a new party too, and that's the Whigs. And they are going to run against each other, Jackson and Clay. Clay already lost to Jackson in 1824. He lost to Jackson and Adams, who won the 1824 election over Jackson. But remember how that played out. Clay was part of that corrupt bargain that Jackson accused him of Adams of doing. But they are going to butt heads in 1832, and their main issue is actually going to be the bank war. So Jackson will veto. And remember, veto was another old vocab word. It means he's going to deny or to essentially stop a law from coming in place. So he's going to veto the bank's rechartering in 1832, which means it's going to expire in 1836. He is actually famous or infamous for using the veto. And that's what this whole political cartoon is going to be about that I'm going to show you in a second here. But he is called, his final nickname, he's earned many over the years, King Mob, for being a man of the people, Old Hickory here in New Orleans. He's going to earn this one, which is not a good one, King Andrew or King Andrew the First, because he uses the veto to cancel out so many of Congress's laws. He actually uses the veto more than all 6 presidents before him combined. Washington, Adams, Jefferson, all those guys, they only used the veto sparsely, but King Andrew will use it all the time. So people, his critics especially, will criticize him for his use of the veto with things like this cartoon, and I will show you that more so in a second. But in this case, people did agree with Jackson. They saw the bank as an elite class of aristocrats that are making decisions for them and controlling their money. So when Jackson does defeat Clay in 1832, he has the support he needs to just end the bank. And the bank, the second bank of the United States, is destroyed. There is no bank of the United States today. They didn't make a third one. They didn't come back with that. Instead, we have a more complicated system of banking. There is something like a national bank called the Federal Reserve, which controls certain policy, fiscal policy, like what you'll see on that chart that's also posted in the folder. So Jackson is a hero in his day for slaying the bank. Bank portrayed here as a many-headed monster, where Jackson over here is defeating it. But some people look back and say that was maybe a bad thing. Again, pretty much everything Jackson does, all of his major events, can be seen as controversial. People either loved him for it or hated him for it. Jacksonian democracy spreading of suffrage to a lot of people, well, people would say that's good, but it didn't go to everybody just yet. And also some people say it would have happened whether Jackson was president or not. A lot of it was already, the wheels were already in motion. The spoil system, rewarding your allies, a lot of people would look negatively on that, yet it still happens today. People will put someone that they're politically aligned with in an office rather than the person who's best qualified. Indian relocation, definitely a black stain on American history, especially when we get to the Trail of Tears, which happened after Jackson. But it did allow for expansion west, so some people will point, especially in Jackson's day, will point to that as a good thing because it allowed for Americans to move out west. Bank war, again, what we just went over, we'll see the effects of that, and the tariff crisis, which almost led to a civil war. So a lot happening in Jackson's time that is important and kind of takes a step closer towards civil war. Now, for the rest of the day, I want to have you guys do a kind of creative assignment. You can look here and you'll see this a bigger version of the King Andrew cartoon. You'll see he's trampling on the Constitution of the United States. There's some writing on the side of veto memory because of his use of the veto. Had I been consulted, born to command, he's more like a king, his opponents will say, than a president. And that is very almost relevant to today as well, because a lot of people will accuse Donald Trump of the same thing. Today, some people accused Barack Obama of doing it 4 years ago, too, of being more like a king than a president, someone who went beyond their constitutional authority. So when you look at that cartoon, and then your assignment, well, one, answer a couple questions. These are quick, 3 questions just on the cartoon itself, show your understanding, and then create your own political cartoon. The directions are here. If you do have other questions on that, you can email me. Be creative with this. You don't have to finish it today. You can get it in at some point this week, but do post it and let me know if you have any questions other than just the description that it's right there. It can be simple. It can be more complex. Use your best judgment. Be creative. It can be about modern day, or it can be about any period of history that we've studied so far this year. So that's your assignment for today. Sorry for the overly long video, but I want to make sure that you guys are getting this information so we can move on to the Civil War and really take our time with that and go in depth there. Okay, if you have any questions, my office hours are always the same, posted there in the important information page. Have a great day, everybody. Talk to you tomorrow.